Céline Feguet was born on May 23, 1976 in the French town of Besançon. It was a quiet and peaceful place, not far from the Swiss border. Céline grew up in a loving family with her parents, 2 brothers, and a sister. Her dad was a farmer, so she and her siblings spent a lot of time outside, helping him keep the farm running. At school, Céline was active in sports and had many friends. When she was 14, her parents took her to nearby Britain and she absolutely loved it. From that point on, she started thinking about moving there someday. She decided to pursue an education that would allow her to work in the hotel business, inspired by her cousin who was a hotel manager in the UK. After finishing school, enrolled in a local university to study accounting. She also continued visiting her cousin in England whenever she could. One summer, he helped her get a job at a hotel, and she spent a few months working there before returning home. At the end of 1995, when Céline was 19, she decided to travel to Britain again for Christmas. At that time of year, public trains in France were experiencing disruptions, so her parents asked a family friend, a truck driver, for help. He was delivering cargo to England and agreed to give her a ride to a town called Folkestone. From there, Céline planned to travel to Fordingbridge, a town about 150 miles or 250 kilometers away, where her cousin lived. On December 18th, left home, planning to reach her cousin's hotel by that evening. Her parents were expecting a call from her to let them know she had arrived safely, but as the evening stretched on, there was no word from Céline. She didn't have a mobile phone, so all her family could do was just wait and hope she would make it to the hotel eventually. Later that night, they finally got a call, but it wasn't Céline. It was her cousin. He told them she still hadn't arrived and asked if something had changed in her plans. Céline's parents grew even more worried and, with no other options, decided to contact the police. French authorities quickly reached out to their British colleagues, who immediately launched a search for the missing woman. Their first step was to speak with Céline's parents, who traveled to England to assist in the investigation. They told them about a family friend, a truck driver, who had agreed to give Céline a ride to Britain. The police tracked him down and he confirmed that he had dropped her off in Folkestone. After that, he had to head in a different direction. While they were at the truck stop, the driver met another French trucker who was heading to a town called Newbury about an hour's drive from Céline's cousin's hotel. The second driver agreed to give Céline a lift, and investigators managed to locate him as well. He told the police he had dropped Céline off at a truck stop in Newbury. She had tried using a payphone there to call her cousin and ask him to pick her up, but for some reason she couldn't get through. By that time, it was already 4:30 p.m. The driver told Céline she could take a train to her cousin's town, but there was a problem. The nearest station was a few dozen miles away, and he couldn't take her there since he had to deliver his cargo in a different direction. He still wanted to help, so he started asking other truckers in the parking lot if anyone could give Céline a ride. The first driver he asked turned him down, saying he was planning to rest before his next trip, but the second trucker agreed. He said he was heading to Salisbury, just about a 30-minute drive from Céline's cousin's town. He even mentioned she could probably catch an 8 p.m. bus from there. With no other options left, Céline went with the third driver, and that's where her trail disappeared. Detectives tried to track this man down, but they didn't have enough solid information to identify him. The second driver, who had handed her over, couldn't recall the license plate number and only remembered that the truck was a white Mercedes. He also provided a description of the man. He was around 35 years old, had short blonde hair and a beard. The second driver also mentioned that something about this man struck him as suspicious. There was something unsettling about his behavior, but he still let Céline go with him because, at that point, she simply had no other choice. Police began to suspect that the third driver might have been involved in Céline's disappearance. Using the witness's description, they created a composite sketch and shared it with the local media. As for the first two drivers, investigators thoroughly checked their alibis and found solid evidence proving they had been in other locations at the time. Detectives soon uncovered a troubling detail that made them even more suspicious of the third driver. Remember how he told Céline she could catch an evening bus to her cousin's town from Salisbury? Well, it turned out that no such bus existed. Investigators wasted no time getting the word out about Céline's disappearance. They shared her story along with the suspect's composite sketch through newspapers and TV. The case quickly grabbed national attention in both Britain and France. It was just days before Christmas, and the disappearance of a young woman during the holiday season struck a chord with the public. On top of that, there were fears that Céline might have fallen victim to a serial killer. Over the past 2 years, several young women had been murdered in the same area. Police believed these cases were linked to a single perpetrator, and now they were worried Celine's disappearance could be connected to him. As a result, the local police launched a full-scale search. Over 100 officers were assigned to the case, along with helicopters and even an airplane to scan the area from above. They concentrated their efforts along the route the third driver was believed to have taken with Celine. But despite all their efforts, they found no trace of her. Unfortunately, the first week of the search yielded no results. Both the police and Celine's family made numerous public appeals, urging anyone who might know something about her whereabouts or the driver himself to come forward. But every lead they followed quickly turned into a dead end. This went on for over a week until the morning of December 29th when police received a chilling call. A man driving near the town of Worcester had pulled over to adjust his windshield wipers. While walking along the roadside, he noticed something odd partially covered by snow. Curious, he went closer and, to his horror, realized it was a human body. Shaken, he immediately rushed home and called the police. Officers arrived at the scene and found the body of a young woman, but at first they couldn't identify her. Initially, they thought it might be the remains of a local woman who had disappeared after leaving a nightclub, but the theory was quickly ruled out. It wasn't until the following day, December 30th, that police confirmed the body was Celine's. Her cousin was brought in to identify her, sparing her parents the heartbreaking task of doing it themselves. Police quickly noticed one important detail. The highway where Celine's body was found was almost in the opposite direction of where she had been heading. This only strengthened their theory that the truck driver who had given her a ride was likely responsible for her murder. All of Celine's clothing and personal belongings were missing, and officers found no trace of them near the site where her body was discovered. The autopsy revealed multiple bruises and abrasions consistent with heavy blows, as well as evidence of strangulation. Medical examiners also found signs of SA on Celine's body, but there was no biological material that could lead them to the perpetrator. One chilling detail stood out. The examiners determined that Celine's body had likely been left by the roadside only about 24 hours before it was found. With 11 days having passed since her disappearance, detectives speculated that the killer may have kept her alive for most of that time or even transported her body with him. The second driver who had helped Celine mentioned that the suspect's truck was equipped with an industrial freezer, which suggested the killer could have preserved her body at low temperatures for days. Despite all this, the police still had no solid leads on the driver's identity. However, a conversation with Celine's parents revealed an intriguing detail. She had been carrying 2 bottles of champagne as Christmas gifts. These, along with all her other belongings, were never found. It seemed likely that the killer had taken them, which gave investigators a potential new angle to explore. This champagne was a specific French brand that wasn't sold in Britain, making those 2 bottles completely unique in the country. Police decided to use this as leverage and sent information about the bottles to the media, along with photos of identical champagne. They hoped that the perpetrator might have shown them to someone or even shared them with friends or family. But unfortunately, this lead also went nowhere. Without any other leads in hand, investigators decided to take an unprecedented step. Despite the absence of the perpetrator's DNA on the victim's body, in early January of the following year, they initiated the first mass DNA collection in Britain's history. The police focused their efforts on drivers of Mercedes trucks and similar models. This process took over a month, and detectives managed to test more than 5,000 drivers. Most of them willingly provided their samples, but there were some who refused. Investigators put them on a separate list for further scrutiny, thinking that one of those individuals might be the killer. Meanwhile, Celine's case continued to gain widespread attention in both British and French media. The police received thousands of tips and leads, but unfortunately, none of them brought the detectives any closer to catching the killer. This continued until mid-February when one tip finally caught the investigators' attention. A man called the police after seeing the suspect's sketch on the news and said it looked strikingly similar to one of his coworkers, a 36-year-old truck driver named Stuart Little. He also mentioned that Stuart drove a Mercedes truck with a refrigeration unit. This lead prompted detectives to start digging into Stuart's background. The first thing they uncovered was Stuart's extensive criminal history, though it consisted of non-violent offenses. Next, they decided to approach him carefully and ask for a DNA sample, presenting it as a routine part of their investigation involving thousands of drivers across Britain. However, Stuart refused to provide a sample, which only deepened their suspicions. After several more attempts to persuade him, though, Stuart eventually gave in and agreed to the test. As soon as they had his DNA, the police secured a warrant to search his truck. That's when they found their first major evidence: traces of blood on the mattress in the sleeping area and in other parts of the cab. Testing confirmed it was Celine's blood, and that was enough for an arrest. The police also obtained a warrant to search Stewart's house. In his garage, they discovered Celine's personal belongings, the ones she had with her when she disappeared. But that wasn't all. Investigators noticed something odd about Stewart's tachograph, the device truck drivers are required to use by law to track their driving hours. It appeared that on the day Celine's body was dumped, Stewart had deliberately concealed information about his movements. However, he made a mistake. After disposing of the body, he resumed work without filling in the missing data. This created a suspicious gap in his driving log, which detectives believed corresponded to the time he transported Celine's body to the roadside. During his first interrogation, Stewart denied any involvement in the murder, claiming he had never even picked up Celine. But when police brought in the other driver, who identified Stewart in a lineup, his story changed. He now admitted to giving Celine a ride and claimed they had consensual intercourse. As for her belongings found in his garage, Stewart insisted she had simply forgotten them when he dropped her off. Naturally, investigators weren't quick to believe Stewart's story. They continued searching for evidence and soon found a witness who had seen him the day before Celine's body was discovered. The witness spotted Stewart near a warehouse about 50 miles from where the body was found. He was seen starting a fire next to his truck, and it appeared he was burning something. When police confronted Stewart about this, he claimed he'd started the fire to warm up his truck brakes, which had supposedly frozen due to the weather. Officers decided to search the area near the warehouse, and it didn't take long for them to find something disturbing. Underneath a fence, they discovered Celine's underwear. It was stained with her blood. Piecing together all the evidence, investigators came up with the most likely timeline of events. When Stewart picked up Celine, he drove to a secluded area where he assaulted and killed her. Based on the blood evidence found in his truck, they believe Stewart kept her body on the lower bunk in his cab for 10 days while continuing to make deliveries as if nothing had happened. Shockingly, just a week after the murder, Stewart went home to celebrate Christmas with his wife and children, while Celine's body remained just a few yards away in his truck. At some point, he decided to dispose of the body. Investigators found receipts showing Stewart had purchased a shovel, an axe, and a saw, likely with the intention of dismembering her remains. However, for some reason, he abandoned that plan and simply left her body near the roadside. Detectives soon uncovered another chilling detail. The day after Christmas, Stewart gave those 2 bottles of rare French champagne to an acquaintance as a gift. When detectives questioned him about it, Stewart claimed he'd bought the bottles from another French truck driver, but investigators didn't believe a word of it. On top of that, they uncovered another intriguing detail. Stewart had always worn a beard, but he completely shaved it off after the murder, right around the time the suspect sketch started appearing in the news. They also figured out why Celine couldn't reach her cousin when she tried to call him from a payphone. It turned out that the UK had recently changed its phone codes, and Celine had his number written down with the old code in her notebook. Unaware of this update, she dialed the outdated number and her call never went through. For Stewart's family, friends, and co-workers, these revelations were a complete shock. To them, he had always seemed like a devoted family man and a reliable friend. At first, many even refused to believe he could have been involved. But as the media revealed the mounting evidence against him, they had no choice but to face the horrifying truth of who Stewart really was. Stewart's trial began in October of that year, and despite the mountain of evidence against him, he stuck to his story, denying everything. But the jury didn't need long to deliberate. They unanimously found him guilty of murder, and he was sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole after serving at least 20 years. Soon after his sentencing, Stewart tried to appeal the verdict, claiming that the high-profile nature of the case had biased the jury, preventing him from receiving a fair trial. However, the appeals court rejected his claims. In 2006, Stewart made another attempt to have his sentence reviewed, but once again, his appeal was denied. 10 years later, in 2016, Stewart became eligible for parole, but his request was denied. The reason was clear. Even after spending 2 decades in prison, he still refused to admit to the crime and maintained his innocence. The judge also voiced concerns that Stewart remained a danger to society. As of now, Stewart remains behind bars, with little chance of being released anytime soon. It's worth mentioning that Stewart was ultimately ruled out as a suspect in the other murders I mentioned earlier. Those crimes turned out to be the work of another truck driver who was arrested in late 1997. While prosecutors linked him to just 2 murders, they still believe he might be responsible for several other unsolved cases. As for Stewart, investigators also suspected that Celine might not have been his only victim. However, after all these years, no evidence has been found to connect him to any other crimes. Case of Brooke Schuyler Richardson. In Ohio, the Richardson family, consisting of Kim, Scott, and their children Jackson and Schuyler, seemed like a typical family. Schuyler was a cheerleader who struggled with an eating disorder from a young age. Her mother Kim first noticed this when Schuyler was 12 years old and refused to buy gum with more than 5 calories. As a flyer on the cheerleading squad, Schuyler felt pressured to maintain a certain weight. This obsession with her body image led to a constant fear of gaining weight. During cheerleading season, Schuyler started throwing up after meals to control her weight, which only made her issues worse. When the season ended, her struggles intensified. Schuyler experienced episodes of binge eating, followed by periods of starvation or extreme dieting. Her parents grew concerned, but Schuyler shut down whenever they tried to talk to her about it. They sought professional help from various doctors and therapists, who eventually diagnosed Schuyler with body dysmorphia, a condition where she obsessively focused on a perceived flaw in her appearance. In July 2016, Schuyler began dating a friend's cousin, but the relationship didn't last long. By January 2017, she had moved on to a new boyfriend, Brandon, and seemed genuinely happy and healthy. Her parents noticed her weight gain and thought her eating disorder was under control. In February, Schuyler picked out her prom dress, a tightly fitted gown that required her to be laced into it. During a family vacation in mid-March, she wore a 2-piece bathing suit and looked wonderful. Her mom, Kim, wanted her to start taking birth control pills to protect her health. In mid-April 2017, Schuyler visited her mother's gynecologist to obtain a prescription for birth control. However, during the visit, the doctor informed Schuyler that she was approximately 8 months pregnant. Schuyler requested the doctor not to tell anyone, and her mother remained unaware of the real reason behind her tears. Schuyler and her boyfriend Brandon attended the prom on May 5th, despite her advanced pregnancy. 2 months later, on July 14, 2017, the police showed up at the Richardson home. They informed Schuyler's parents, Kim and Scott, that they needed to speak to the teenager about something she may have witnessed. The police officers assured the parents that Schuyler was not in trouble and took her at their word. Scott decided to drive Schuyler to the police station, unsure of what awaited them. The police wanted to question Schuyler regarding a call they received from a gynecologist's office. A patient of an OBGYN doctor gave birth to a stillborn baby and buried it in their backyard. The police were informed and took Schuyler, the patient, into custody for questioning. Her father was not allowed to be present during the initial interview. The police read Schuyler her rights and shared the details of the doctor's report. According to the doctor, Schuyler had discovered her pregnancy on April 26th, but later reported that the baby was not alive and had been buried in the backyard. Schuyler admitted to the police that she had given birth to a stillborn baby girl on May 7, 2017. She explained that she delivered the baby in the bathroom, noticed it was not breathing, and had no heartbeat. Feeling the need to bury the baby, she retreated to the backyard, dug a shallow grave, and buried the body. To mark the spot, she placed a vase with a flower at the burial site. The police informed Schuyler's parents, Kim and Scott, about the true reason for her detention. They were shocked to learn that Schuyler had been pregnant, as they had no idea. They expressed sadness that Schuyler had gone through this ordeal alone and without their support. Schuyler revealed that she had named the baby Annabelle and claimed the father was a close friend's cousin, whom she briefly dated. Crime scene investigators searched the Richardson backyard, removing weeds and debris to uncover the baby's remains. Despite the challenges, they found several bones, including pieces of the skull, which they carefully collected and preserved. After more than 5 hours of questioning, Schuyler and her parents were allowed to return home. However, 6 days later, the police contacted Schuyler again, informing her that they had received new information from the coroner's office. They claimed that the baby's bones showed signs of burning, which Schuyler vehemently denied. She insisted that she would never harm her child. Police suggested that Schuyler might have tried to cremate the baby to hide the evidence, but she continued to deny any wrongdoing. However, Schuyler suddenly changed her story, admitting that she may have used a lighter to try and cremate the baby's remains. She also stated that the baby might have been born alive and made a noise or even cried before dying. Schuyler confessed to holding the newborn too tightly which might have contributed to its death. During a lengthy interrogation, the police gathered enough evidence to arrest Skylar on a charge of reckless homicide. They believed she had suffocated her baby. After presenting the case to a grand jury, Skylar was indicted and arrested for aggravated murder, which carries a mandatory life sentence in Ohio. At her arraignment, Skylar pleaded not guilty to additional charges of voluntary manslaughter, abuse of a corpse, and endangering children. She spent the weekend in jail until her family secured a $50,000 bond. Skylar became the center of a media frenzy following her child's tragic death. The public judged and scrutinized every move she and her family made, taking a toll on their well-being. They retreated to the safety of their home, but even stepping outside became difficult due to threats and photographers. Despite her defense attorneys believing Skylar gave a false confession, the prosecution pressed forward with their case. Even when the medical examiner retracted her initial report of burning, the prosecution clung to Skylar's admission that she had attempted to cremate the remains. And throughout this period, Skylar's family endured immense stress and fear. The public scrutiny and threats made their lives unbearable, and they struggled to navigate a world under constant scrutiny. Skylar's defense attorneys worked tirelessly to defend her against the charges. Skylar's family raised the $50,000 bail, but as a condition of her release, she was ordered to wear an ankle bracelet. She remained confined to her home, avoiding public appearances. Over 12 months, Skylar's life took a different path. Her university plans were put on hold as she awaited trial for her baby's murder. The charges were serious, and the defense filed a motion to move the trial to a different county, but it was denied. Skylar faced the trial in the original jurisdiction, grappling with the emotional and psychological impact of the allegations and her isolation. Spending time with her dogs provided comfort and companionship as she awaited her trial. Her family stood by her, believing in her innocence and hoping the truth would come to light. Despite the challenges, Skylar remained determined to fight for her freedom. In July 2019, the state offered a plea deal. If Skylar pleaded guilty to the remaining charges, they would withdraw the aggravated murder charge. Skylar's parents were conflicted about the decision, but after careful consideration, Skylar turned down the plea deal. This decision terrified her parents, who wondered if she made the right choice, but they knew it was her decision, not theirs. Skylar went on trial on September 3, 2019 for the murder of her newborn baby girl. The prosecution presented as evidence a text message Skylar sent to her mother shortly after giving birth, saying she was happy and excited that her belly had returned to its normal size. They claimed this showed Skylar was relieved to be rid of her baby. The prosecution alleged that Skylar sent more texts to her mother and boyfriend within 24 hours of the baby's death, conveying her excitement and happiness. They pointed to phrases like, "I'm so excited and I feel so much better this morning," as proof of her guilt. The state believed Skylar was thrilled about the baby's death and attempted to hide her guilt. The prosecution also claimed Skylar had no intention of keeping her baby and presented evidence that she had searched online for ways to get rid of the baby. They alleged that Skylar's mother had threatened that her life would end if she became pregnant, which instilled fear in Skylar. On the third day of the trial, a doctor testified that the baby's death was a violent homicide, but admitted she couldn't determine when the baby's skull fractures occurred. The defense challenged the doctor's findings, suggesting she may have been biased. The defense also questioned the doctor's methods, pointing out that she didn't examine the remains under a microscope or consult with an obstetrician. Another doctor, a fetal medicine specialist, testified that it was unlikely the baby was stillborn, citing Skylar's admission that she felt the baby moving inside her. The prosecution's case included shocking evidence, including images of the deceased baby's remains, which visibly affected Skylar during the trial. Skylar's reaction to seeing pictures of her baby's remains was to stare straight ahead, avoiding eye contact. This stoic behavior contrasted with her emotional response the previous day when the judge entered the room. Skylar's defense attorneys argued that her life was far from perfect, even before the murder accusation. They claimed the prosecution's evidence was incomplete and misleading, and some texts were taken out of context. They emphasized that Skylar's frequent use of certain language did not prove she murdered her daughter. The defense highlighted Skylar's mental health struggles, particularly her long battle with an eating disorder. They presented evidence of her regular visits to a psychologist and nutritionist, along with pictures showing her varying weights and appearances. They argued that despite her physical state, Skylar tried to comfort and care for the lifeless body after giving birth. Skylar's attorney explained that she intended to tell her family about the pregnancy, but never had the chance. According to her doctor, She had 8 to 10 weeks before delivery and planned to attend prom and graduate before telling her mother, whom she knew would be unsupportive. An obstetrician testified that the baby was stillborn, and Skylar's description of the baby's appearance suggested it was not a healthy newborn. The doctor pointed out that Skylar only gained 15 pounds during pregnancy, possibly restricting the baby's development due to her eating disorder. The defense aimed to cast doubt on Skylar's statements to the police, suggesting she only told them what they wanted to hear. They argued that other factors may have contributed to the baby's death, and Skylar did not harm the baby. Skylar Richardson's trial lasted for 1 week, after which the jury deliberated for just 4 hours before returning a verdict. She was acquitted of aggravated murder, involuntary manslaughter, and child endangerment, but convicted of abuse of a corpse, a felony that carries a sentence of up to 1 year in prison. The judge ordered her to be held in jail until her sentencing hearing, which took place the next day. During the sentencing hearing, Skylar apologized for her actions and acknowledged the harm she had caused. The judge strongly admonished her for her role in the tragic loss of her baby, believing that if she had made better decisions during her pregnancy, her child would still be alive today. The judge sentenced her to 3 years probation for abuse of a corpse, emphasizing that her actions were morally reprehensible and illegal. In November 2020, a judge granted her request to terminate her probation 2 years early, acknowledging her progress and agreeing that she no longer required supervision. Since being acquitted, Skylar has taken advantage of her opportunity to demonstrate her rehabilitation. She has completed 2 semesters of college and has been working part-time at the law firm that represented her. Although she has faced challenges in finding employment due to her probationary status, Skylar remains determined to pursue her career goals, including attending law school and becoming a public defender. Central High School, Knoxville, Tennessee. The football stadium lights up and the energy is high as everyone turns up to support their home team, the Bobcats. The marching band and cheerleaders keep the entertainment going and the energy up for the crowd. Some say the school revolves around football and the community spirit is always strong when the team plays. In the autumn of 2014, there was a new cheerleader on the team. 14-year-old Emma Walker was the only freshman to make the team that year. Described as passionate, spirited and fun with an infectious smile, Emma threw herself into cheerleading and took it very seriously. She adored being in that environment. She was kind, caring and high-achieving with hopes of one day becoming a neonatal nurse, caring for sick or premature newborn babies. One evening while Emma was cheering, she caught the attention of Central High's wide receiver, William Riley Gall, known as Riley. He spotted her from the sidelines and the attraction between the pair was instant. Riley, 2 years her senior, was also a top-performing and popular student. He was a member of the community church, loved video games, and his friends said he was a bit of a joker and not at all the stereotypical jock type. At the time, was already in a relationship, but he soon broke it off to begin dating Emma. The football star and cheerleader became the quintessential popular high school couple. Riley clicked with Emma's family. Her parents said he was like the boy next door, polite, well-mannered and likable. But their attitude quickly changed when they found out that Riley was keeping his promise to take his ex-girlfriend to the junior year prom. And then he was taking Emma to the senior year prom. This didn't sit well with Emma's parents, and they were concerned that his priorities didn't lie with their daughter. But Emma wasn't concerned. Her social media account was often flooded with pictures of the young couple. The pair would upload loving photos and silly selfies. Emma's friends, however, said they didn't find it easy to get to know Riley, but thought this was down to him being shy and more reserved. But as time passed, friends of Emma said they stopped justifying his behavior and started to find it a bit more concerning. Many of Emma's friends said it became obvious that Riley didn't want Emma engaging with anyone that wasn't him. He became controlling, possessive, and jealous. Emma's friends voiced their concerns, but Emma brushed it off and told them they didn't need to worry. Emma's parents took away her phone in a bid to stop the toxicity, but Riley gave Emma an iPod Touch, so she was able to secretly text him through the Wi-Fi without her parents suspecting anything. For the next 2 years, Emma and Riley would be on and off numerous times, and relationship was becoming more toxic and tumultuous. Each breakup was more dramatic than the last, and the young pair would frequently get into nasty arguments. Riley would send message after message and call her constantly. He was always bombarding her, waiting outside her work for hours until she finished. He once said to her, "You're dead to me. I'll check the obituary." But for every nasty message, it would soon be followed by an apology. "I'm sorry for however I act. "I love you more than words can describe," he would say. Emma's parents, Mark and Jill, said they tried to convince Emma to break off the relationship many times. Jill said he had a way of isolating her and making her think that he was the only one. The more they told Emma to break it off, the more they all butted heads. By the autumn of 2016, to everyone's unease, and Riley's relationship was still the same. Riley had graduated and was a freshman at Maryville College, about 30 minutes away, and 16-year-old Emma was in her junior year of high school. Around Halloween that year, in a desperate bid to help their daughter, Emma's parents decided to ground her, not allowing her to leave the house unless it was to go to school or cheerleading. They started monitoring everywhere she went and everyone she spoke to, and to their surprise, it seemed to have the positive effect they were hoping for. Mark said she was like her old self again. She would spend time with the family, socializing and eating dinner with everyone. Emma had even texted her friend Keegan to say that she and Riley were done for good after she had seen pictures of him with other girls at college. Keegan and other friends breathed a sigh of relief. As everyone expected, Riley did not take the breakup well. Friday, November 18, 2016. Emma was allowed out to go to a gathering at a friend's house. At around 11:30 p.m., her friend Zach arrived at the house. He was met by Emma, who quickly pulled him inside. She told him she had been receiving strange text messages from a number she didn't know. One of the messages said, "Come outside alone if you don't want to see a loved one get hurt. Go to your car with your keys. If you don't comply, I will hurt them." Emma thought it was one of Riley's friends playing a strange prank on her. She texted back, threatening to call the police. This didn't deter anything, and the messages got more disturbing. Emma then got a message saying Riley had been dropped outside the house. Emma and Zach ran outside, and sure enough, they saw someone lying face down in a ditch near the house. It was Riley. When the pair reached him, he was holding his head and seemed confused. He said he had been kidnapped and didn't know how he got there. Emma was crying and told Riley they had broken up and he needed to leave her alone. Dejected, Riley walked off down the street alone. He then called his friend Noah, telling him he had been kidnapped. Noah didn't believe a word. Emma, feeling uneasy, stayed with her friends that night. The following morning, just after 10 a.m., she drove home with her friend Haley, who lived close to the Walkers. While driving, they spotted a man dressed all in black, walking around on Emma Street. Emma dropped Haley at her house and drove back home herself. Emma was going to meet her mom Jill and started getting ready inside. But the mystery man soon came back and started ringing the doorbell and banging on the door. Emma was frantic and texted her friends. She also messaged the one person she believed would come to her rescue, Riley. She said, "I hate you, but I need you right now." He replied saying he was speeding over to help her. When Riley arrived, the mystery man had disappeared. Emma's friend, Haley, knew who the man was. She said there was no doubt it was Riley. This was also confirmed when she saw his car parked nearby. She even texted Riley asking what he was doing lurking around near Emma's house, but Riley denied it was him. Jill Walker returned home looking for Emma. She found her daughter and Riley talking in the front yard. Jill reminded him he wasn't allowed to come near the house and told him to leave. Emma was visibly shaken and was worried it could have been a burglar. Wasn't convinced and knew this wasn't a coincidence. But Emma reassured Jill. She knew Riley had nothing to do with what happened. After this incident, Jill and Mark were so concerned for their daughter, they took her to work on her Sunday morning shift. They waited until she'd finished and drove back home with her. Sunday night, November 20th, 2016. Everything in the Walker household appeared quiet and calm. Emma spoke to her friend Keegan about an assignment that was due and then headed for bed around midnight. A few minutes past midnight, Riley, who was back in Maryville, asked to borrow his roommate's phone. Using this phone, he called Emma. Riley alleged that during this call, Emma had told him she had no interest in getting back together with him, and the conversation abruptly ended. After this, Riley sent her countless texts and called around 40 times, leaving numerous voicemails. Emma didn't respond, and Riley eventually stopped trying to make contact. During the night, Emma's dad woke up after hearing what sounded like someone in the house and a door slamming twice. He checked around, looking in Emma and her brother Evan's bedrooms, but he couldn't see or hear anything and nothing seemed disturbed. Thinking he'd just imagined the sounds, he went back to bed. Around 6 a.m., Jill went into Emma's room to wake her up for school. Jill said her name, but Emma didn't respond. She reached out and touched her leg, but Emma still didn't move. When Jill looked at Emma's face, she said she knew she needed to call an ambulance. Emma was pale and her lips were blue. Jill checked for a pulse, but felt nothing. 16-year-old Emma Walker was dead. Police soon arrived at the Walker house. A small amount of blood was near Emma's mouth and it looked as though she may have vomited, possibly due to ingesting something. However, police noticed a small hole in the wall of Emma's bedroom, which pointed them elsewhere. It was a bullet hole. Someone had shot Emma in the head through the wall while she was sleeping. 2 shell casings were found outside the home and police needed to work out where the second shot was fired. Walking around the outside of the house, police eventually found the second bullet hole at approximately the same height as the first. This shot was also fired into Emma's bedroom just by her bed. The gunshots had been fired from as close as 4 or 5 feet from Emma's bedroom window between 2:30 and 3 a.m. One bullet had hit her behind her left ear, likely killing her instantly, and the second bullet had lodged in her pillow. Whoever the shooter was knew the layout of the room and knew the position Emma would be lying in. Hundreds of tributes came flooding in, including many from Emma's ex-boyfriend Riley. The candlelight vigil was held at Central High, and her fellow cheerleaders released balloons in her memory at that week's football game. When police started interviewing Emma Walker's friends and family, the same name kept coming up, over and over: Riley Gall. Some of Riley's friends became concerned for his well-being after Emma's passing. They told detectives a secret Riley had shared the day after he claimed he was kidnapped. Riley said he was now fearing for his life and had taken his grandfather's gun for protection. He then showed the gun to his friend Alex. Another friend, Noah, told detectives that Riley had asked him how to remove fingerprints from a gun, claiming he was asking for his roommate. Just a day before Emma was shot, Riley's grandfather reported this very gun as stolen. Riley asked Noah and Alex if they would help him get rid of the gun in the Tennessee River, as he feared it may implicate him in some way, even though he claimed he had absolutely nothing to do with Emma's death. Detectives brought Riley in for questioning. Police talked to him for hours that day. The more Riley talked, the more holes appeared in his story. He was elusive and detached, and the way he spoke about Emma did not match with his previous words. He referred to Emma as the girl and wouldn't use her name. Detectives said Riley was totally emotionless and disconnected, and his whole story seemed very rehearsed. "Oh, the girl, she texted me." "Which girl?" "The one that passed away." "Okay, which one?" "Emma." Despite maintaining he'd been in Maryville at the time Emma had been killed, cell phone analysis proved this to be a lie. His phone placed him on the freeway around midnight heading back to Knoxville from Maryville. It also put Riley in the vicinity of Emma's address at around 3:45 a.m., and she had been killed between 2:30 a.m. and 3 a.m. Officers quizzed him on the gun and the information they had received from Noah and Alex, but Riley denied any of these conversations ever happened. Riley was the police's only suspect at this point, but they did not have enough to make an arrest. After he got out of the station, Riley sent Noah and Alex a text message and told them not to talk to the police again and instructed them to delete the messages from him. Little did Riley know, Alex and Noah were still talking with officers, and had been the second they found out Emma had died. The pair wanted to support the investigation and knew they could retrieve the murder weapon. Police were initially hesitant and warned them about the safety risks of getting involved, but the pair were both adamant and determined to help. "I wasn't fearful of my safety. I was just fearful that maybe justice couldn't have been done if we made the wrong move," Alex said. They hatched a plan with the police to catch Riley in his own lies. Noah and Alex spoke to Riley and agreed to help him dispose of his grandfather's gun in the Tennessee River. The plan was the police would wait nearby ready to arrest Riley as soon as he pulled the gun out. The boys would text the police a code word signaling them to move in. Officers gave Noah and Alex wires and body cameras, and an intricate undercover investigation began. After this was filmed, the three made their way to the river with the gun that Riley had been hiding at his stepfather's house. When they got there, Riley took out the gun ready to throw it in. But thanks to Noah and Alex, the police were waiting. 48 hours after Emma had been found, her killer was in handcuffs. Riley Gall was charged with the murder of Emma Walker. In the boot of Riley's car, police found black clothing and shoes. The only conclusion they could draw was that it had definitely been Riley trying to get into Emma's house a few days earlier. The trial of Riley Gall began a year and a half later, and he pled not guilty. He chose not to testify, and his legal team called no witnesses to the stand. His team's line of attack was not to argue that he didn't fire the bullets, but to argue that it was a total accident that the bullets had killed her. They claimed he was just trying to scare Emma by shooting near her, without realizing the bullets would go through the wall. He wanted her to confide in him and ultimately resume the relationship. His lawyer said Emma saw Riley as her hero, and this was all part of his clumsy plan to pretend to save her, but it went horribly wrong when he accidentally killed her in the process. The defense asked the jury if they were to find him guilty of anything, it was reckless homicide, which carried a substantially lesser sentence. But the prosecution said everything pointed to this being an intentional act, and it stemmed from his anger at her not wanting to get back together with him. The jury found William Riley Gall guilty of the first-degree murder of Emma Walker, as well as stalking, theft, reckless endangerment, and being in possession of a firearm during a dangerous felony. In the state of Tennessee, a first-degree murder conviction carries an automatic life sentence. Riley was sentenced to life in prison with a minimum term of 51 years before he could even be considered for parole. He will be in his 70s. In May 2021, was announced that Riley Gall was seeking an acquittal based on insufficient evidence. If the acquittal was not granted, he was seeking a new trial. A motion hearing was set for June 4, 2021. However, his request was denied. Riley's attorney said he plans to appeal the ruling. Emma should have graduated in May 2018. Her family accepted her diploma for her, and her cap and gown were laid out on the chair she would have been sat in. Since her death, Emma's family and friends continue to work hard to keep her legacy alive. Her high school has a scholarship in her name. Jill said Emma's love of animals and her dreams of becoming a neonatal nurse were such big parts of her character. The Walker family has since had a dog park and a neonatal intensive care unit patient room at East Tennessee Children's Hospital named after her. Jill said that she hopes people remember Emma by channeling her energy and making sure they are always kind to others. Case of Connie Alm. Connie Alm was born on July 18, 1974, in Malaysia. She was the younger of two daughters and enjoyed a very close relationship with her parents. In 1995, Connie moved to the United States to pursue higher education and a career in information technology. While living in the United States, Connie met a man named Brandon. He was a U.S. and an ethnic Chinese whose parents emigrated from Singapore over 20 years ago. Initially, Kanye and Brandon were just friends, but their friendship eventually blossomed into a romantic relationship. Brandon became a significant figure in Kanye's life, supporting and helping her in various ways. They got married in 2001. Kanye's life was on track in 2003. She was working as an analyst in San Diego, planning a future with her husband, and hoping to start a family. Her life changed dramatically that year. The trouble began when Connie's father, Ong Bayong, was diagnosed with cancer. Connie decided to fly to Malaysia to support her family during this difficult time. On June 1, 2003, Connie and her husband, Brandon, arrived in Malaysia. However, Brandon returned to the USA after a few days, leaving Connie to care for her father in Kuala Lumpur. Despite the distance, Connie and Brandon stayed close through daily phone calls. They would talk for hours, sharing stories about their daily lives, including their two pets. Connie's father underwent surgery to remove a kidney, but fortunately, his health began to recover. As he improved, Connie planned her return to the USA, scheduling a flight for June 14, 2003. Connie organized a farewell dinner at a local restaurant the evening before her departure, and she invited her mother, sister, and closest friends to join her. That evening, June 13, 2003, Connie and her mother arrived at the designated meeting spot later than the others. They had trouble finding a parking spot in front of the mall, so Connie parked in the underground lot. However, her mother was concerned about the poor lighting in the lot rather than the parking fee. Once they arrived at the second-floor restaurant, Connie was excited to reunite with her childhood friends whom she hadn't seen in a long time. They spent a few hours catching up, but Connie soon noticed that her mother, Pearlie, was starting to look tired. When Connie asked if her mother wanted to head home, Pearlie said she had a lot to do that day, was okay with leaving early, and promised her friends she would be back soon. Connie, her mother, and her sister Elsie got up from the table to pay for their parking. They went to the payment terminal, which was located on the first floor, a floor above the underground parking lot. As they waited in line for the terminal, Connie realized she had left the parking ticket in their car. She asked her sister and mother to stay in line while she went back down to retrieve the ticket. Elsie and Polly waited for 10 more minutes, but Connie still hadn't returned. Then her sister started calling her. The first call went unanswered, and the second one was sent to voicemail. This was unusual, and Elsie and Polly immediately sensed that something was wrong. They quickly went to the parking lot, where they were shocked to find that Kenny's car was no longer there. They searched the parking lot several times to make sure, and after confirming that the car was indeed gone, They realized that Kanye must have disappeared along with it. Polly was certain that something had happened to her daughter, as Kanye would never leave without saying anything. Although the parking lot was poorly lit, it had surveillance cameras that might provide some clues about what had happened. The mall security initially refused to show Kanye's relatives the footage, but relented after her mother begged for their help. At midnight, Prilly and Elsie sat in front of a monitor and watched the shocking footage, which confirmed their worst fears. The footage revealed Kenny's car speeding out of the underground parking lot, crashing through the barrier. Although the footage quality was poor, it was evident that a man was driving with Kenny in the passenger seat. Her body was positioned as if she was trying to distance herself from the driver, leaning against the door. Upon seeing the footage, Prilly immediately filed the disappearance and kidnapping report at a police station. The police launched an investigation, while Kanye's family and friends drove around Kuala Lumpur desperately searching for her purple proton tiara. Meanwhile, Brandon, Kanye's husband, began to feel a sense of unease. He tried calling his wife multiple times, but she didn't answer. He then contacted her mother, who informed him about the events that had transpired. The news of Kanye's disappearance left Brandon in shock. Prilly could hear him sobbing over the phone. As dawn broke, Kanye's friends and family reluctantly returned home, their search efforts having yielded no results. The police disseminated information about the disappearance and conducted their own search, but unfortunately, it didn't lead to any breakthroughs. Even the footage from the mall's parking lot, where Kanye was kidnapped, failed to provide any leads on identifying the driver of the car. More than 72 hours have passed since Kanye's loved ones last saw her. Authorities believe that if she was kidnapped, it wasn't for ransom. If money was the motive, the kidnapper would have demanded it by now. A disturbing find was made by police when they discovered Kanye's car left empty on a city street. The front right tire was severely damaged, indicating it had been driven on while flat for some time, causing it to shred. In the back of the car, a large red stain was found on the passenger seat. Forensic experts collected evidence, including scrapings from the back seat, fingerprints from the steering wheel, and other parts of the car. There were many clues found in the vehicle. Kenny's family and friends held on to hope and prayed for her safe return. However, their hopes were crushed the next day after her car was found. On June 17th, a road worker detected a strong, foul smell coming from a manhole near the highway. Upon lifting the lid, he discovered a body that someone had attempted to burn using 2 car tires and sticks. A team of leading forensic experts from the Royal Malaysian Police immediately arrived at the scene. They found 2 car tires filled with concrete which had been used as stands for road signs lying on top of the body. It appeared that whoever had hidden the body trying to make it harder to identify. Although the discovery of the body seemed to confirm the family's worst fears, Kenny's mother, Prilly, refused to believe that her daughter was dead without official confirmation. "Until they confirm it, we will continue to hope that she will turn up alive," she said. The family went to the morgue, but the doctor said that they couldn't confirm the identity of the body yet. Connie's family members provided DNA samples for comparative analysis. Unfortunately, the results confirmed their worst nightmare. The body was indeed that of their daughter, Connie. Some sources claim that before the DNA test results, Connie's family identified the jewelry on the body. However, as a loving mother, Polly held onto the hope that her daughter was still alive until the very end. The emotional torture she endured is unimaginable. The autopsy revealed that Connie had 2 stab wounds to her abdomen, and a medical forensics expert found signs of strangulation. A cloth was tied around her neck in multiple knots, and semen was found inside her body, which served as a source of DNA. A few days after the body was discovered, an incident raised questions about the work of police. An undercover policeman, Subramaniam Ravichandran, reported to his superiors that on the night of Connie's disappearance, he was on duty with his partner, patrolling the streets of Kuala Lumpur at night on their motorcycles. Both officers were dressed in civilian clothes. They noticed a car parked incorrectly, taking up half the road, and stopped to investigate if anyone was inside. Ravichandran approached the driver's door and saw a man behind the wheel with a woman in the passenger seat. He knocked on the window, and when the man lowered it partially, Ravichandran displayed his police ID and asked what they were doing. The driver replied they were just chatting and not doing anything illegal. Ravichandran then requested to see their IDs. As the driver handed over the documents, she in the passenger seat made unusual hand gestures seemingly asking for help, but stopped whenever her assumed boyfriend looked at her. Noticing this, Ravichandran asked the driver to step out of the car. However, the driver responded aggressively, claiming Ravichandran was not a police officer but a thief. He then raised the window and reached for the ignition. Realizing the car might drive off, Ravichandran drew his pistol and shot the right front wheel. Despite this, the car sped away. Ravichandran and his partner pursued on a motorcycle but were unable to catch up, which is puzzling given the car had a flat tire. At the time, the Malaysian Police Department was in a state of disarray, which might explain why the officer didn't call for backup or report the incident. The car with a flat tire was a purple Proton Tiara, driven by 27-year-old Ahmad Najib bin Aris, accompanied by a woman named Connie Alm. Although the police chase did not result in an immediate arrest, the officers managed to obtain documents from the driver. Tragically, Connie Alm was later found dead. It is possible that if the officer had acted differently during the encounter, the outcome might have been different. Unfortunately, Ravichandran only informed his superiors about the incident after Connie's body was discovered. The only positive outcome of that night was that the police had obtained documents that could help identify the suspect. Besides Kenny's family, many Malaysians attended her farewell ceremony. Her death was a devastating loss for her husband, Brandon. Meanwhile, the police launched a search for Ahmad Najib. They discovered that he didn't live at the address listed in his documents, but his name was genuine, providing multiple leads to track him down. The police searched for Ahmad Najib's name in the Registry of Documented Marriages and the National Agency of Social Support. They found a match, revealing that Ahmad Najib bin Aris was born and raised in Muar, Malaysia. He was the second of 4 siblings and had dropped out of school to work and support his family. In 1998, he moved from Muar to Kuala Lumpur, where he got married and had 2 children. Since 2000, he had worked as a cabin cleaner for Malaysia Airlines. Knowing the name of Ahmad Najib's wife and her workplace, the police began surveillance. She worked at a metropolitan bank, and after her shift ended, undercover police officers followed her to determine her home address. Now that they knew where Ahmad Najib lived, the police had to ensure he was inside the house without alerting him. For 3 days, they monitored the house, but Ahmad Najib didn't appear. At one point, investigators doubted whether Ahmad Najib still lived with his family, but this was a hasty conclusion. On the 4th day of surveillance, at around 4 a.m., a cab pulled up to the house and Ahmad Najib stepped out. Within a minute, he was handcuffed and taken to the police station for questioning. News of the arrest and the suspect's identity quickly reached the press. Many people who knew Ahmad Najib were shocked to learn that he was suspected of kidnapping and killing Connie Om. Those who knew him described Ahmad Najib as a devoted husband, a caring father of 2, and an overall good person. However, investigators soon discovered that he may have been hiding a darker side. During the initial interrogation, Ahmad Najib remained calm and requested to speak only with the head of the Criminal Investigation Division. It wasn't until he was presented with evidence linking him to Connie Ong that Ahmad Najib began to deny any wrongdoing. His confidence seemed to wane as the evidence mounted. Investigators showed him 2 IDs that he had given to an officer on the night of Connie Ong's kidnapping. They also revealed that they had found bloodstains on his jacket and jeans, which DNA analysis would likely confirm to be Connie Ong's blood. After realizing the officers had solid evidence and were not bluffing, Ahmad Najib confessed to kidnapping and killing Connie Om. Within 10 days of the kidnapping, on June 23, 2003, he was taken to court, where he repeated his confession. The police then conducted an investigative experiment where Ahmad Najib showed them all the locations he had been with Connie Om. He provided a detailed account of how he forced her to be intimate with him multiple times, how he took her life, and how he attempted to dispose of her body. Evidence supporting his statements was found at all the locations he led the police to. The investigation began at the underground parking lot, where cameras captured footage of Ahmad Najib. According to his statement, he was waiting for his former boss, who had fired him and whom he sought revenge against. However, the claim about the former boss was never verified. Hiding in the darkness, he observed Connie Ong searching for something in her car and seized the opportunity to take advantage of the situation. He forcefully pushed her into the car, issuing threats that if she attempted to escape or seek help, she would face dire consequences. Overwhelmed, Connie Ong became disoriented and obediently followed his instructions. Next, he took the driver's seat and sped out of the parking lot. After crashing through a barrier, he stopped in an industrial area where he began to harass Connie Om. Just as this was happening, a plainclothes police officer approached the car. Ahmad Najib falsely told the officer that he didn't know he had taken the wrong person until the officer asked him and his victim for their identification. Even assuming Ahmad Najib had intended to kidnap his former boss, his guilt remains unchanged. Undoubtedly, his former boss would have suffered the same fate as Connie Om. According to Ahmad Najib's account, he managed to evade the pursuing officer. Despite the officer possessing his documents, Ahmad Najib failed to consider releasing Connie Om. Instead, he stopped the car on the street to replace a tire damaged by a bullet. A car containing a woman was parked at the spot where he had pulled over. He approached she and asked for a car jack, intending to change his tire. However, he noticed Kanyong signaling to she, who then handed him the jack. He abandoned the idea of changing the tire and drove off immediately. Later, he stopped at a secluded area and used a knife to threaten Kanyong, forcing her to engage in intimate acts with him. Afterwards, he drove to another district where he coerced Connie Ong into satisfying him again, with both of them in the back seat. Connie Ong pleaded for mercy, but he took her life instead. He then disposed of her body in a manhole near a highway, moved the car to another location, and left it there. 16 hours later, he returned to the scene with a gasoline canister in an attempt to conceal evidence of the crime. DNA analysis confirmed that the semen found in Connie Ong's body belonged to Ahmad Najib Ben Aris. His DNA was also discovered in the car, along with his fingerprints, providing further irrefutable proof of his guilt. Additionally, the analysis revealed that the blood on his jacket and jeans belonged to Connie Ong. The trial began on September 15, 2003, 3 months after Connie Ong's death. This high-profile case drew widespread attention from the Malaysian media and public. The trial attracted not only ordinary Malaysians and journalists, but also individuals seeking to boost their reputation, including numerous attorneys representing Ahmad Najib. Despite admitting guilt during the investigation, overwhelming evidence, including DNA proof, Ahmad Najib changed his stance after consulting 6 attorneys. At his first trial, he claimed his confession was made under police pressure. However, the judge before whom Ahmad Najib confessed immediately after his arrest testified that there were no signs of physical abuse and Ahmad Najib appeared calm and relaxed. The attorneys then shifted their strategy, arguing that Connie Om was in the car with Ahmad Najib voluntarily. They suggested that Connie Om, a black belt in Taekwondo, should have attempted to escape if she were being held against her will. However, this attempt to blame Connie Ong was rejected, as people respond differently to critical situations. However, another claim surfaced, stating that Connie Ong had consensual intimacy with Ahmad Najib and that Connie Ong's death was caused by strangulation used to heighten the experience. Forensic experts disagreed with and rejected this account of what happened. The cloth around Connie's neck was tied in multiple knots, suggesting that Connie Ong had no intention of loosening it. Indeed, the cloth was so tight that the skin beneath was the only area on the body not affected by the fire. Furthermore, the cloth was a type used for cleaning plane windows, and given the defendant's job as a cabin cleaner, this linked him more closely to the crime. Additionally, the lawyers struggled to explain the stab wounds on Connie's body. At this point, Ahmad Najib's attorneys advised him to remain silent and not testify. Many questioned why Connie didn't escape the car when she had at least 2 chances to do so. On February 23, 2005, Ahmad Najib Ben Aris was convicted of all charges connected to the crime committed against Connie Ong. The evidence pointed to him as the sole perpetrator. Ahmad Najib received the maximum sentence under Malaysian law, 20 years imprisonment and 10 strokes of the cane for violating Connie Ong's sexual integrity, plus the death penalty for causing her death. In Malaysia, the death penalty is carried out by hanging, a method that differs significantly from the lethal injection used in some other countries such as the USA. Ahmad Najib's lawyers attempted to appeal the sentence twice but were unsuccessful both times. In 2010, Ahmad Najib petitioned the head of state to commute his death sentence to life imprisonment, maintaining his innocence. However, his plea for clemency was rejected. More than 13 years after Connie Ong's death, on September 23, 2016, Ahmad Najib's sentence was carried out. He was 40 years old at the time of his execution. The case of Lin family. Min Lin and Yoon Lin's romance began in the late 1980s, when they met at an Australian university. They both came from China and had moved to Australia to further their studies. Min had completed her bachelor's degree and was doing an internship, while Yoon participated in a student exchange program. They met each other after meeting accidentally in the university hallway. After graduating, they got married and settled in North Epping, Sydney, where their love continued to grow into a strong, close-knit family. Min and Yoon had their first child, Brenda Lin, in August 1994. She was mostly known as Brenda. Their son, Henry, was born in 1997, and their youngest child, Terry, was born in February. At the start of the February, Min and Yoon decided to start a business, opening a small newsroom. Through their hard work, it became a successful news agency with a publishing arm on Rose Street. The Lin family's business success had brought them economic security, a spacious house, a luxury car, and good education for their children. Min had handled business affairs, while Yoon had focused on taking care of their home and children. Neighbors had respected the Lin family for their hard work and kindness. As parents, Min and Yoon had been appreciated for their care and love for their children. They had never quarreled. Their children had been very obedient and close-knit. Brenda, the eldest daughter, had stood out for her beauty, good academic performance, and kindness towards animals. Henry and Terry, two sons, had been both active and loved sports, especially soccer. As the Lin family had settled into life in Australia and their assets had increased, they had begun bringing relatives from China to live with them. In the early 2000s, Min's parents had been the first to move to North Epping and had helped with childcare. A few years later, Yun's parents also moved to Sydney suburb, with Min and Yoon buying them a small house. Yun's sister, Irene, came to live with the Lin family, assisting with household chores and the children. By this time, the Lin family business was generating substantial income, reportedly nearing $1 million annually. In late 2007, Min Lin's younger sister, Kathy, and her husband, Robert, moved to Australia in search of better opportunities. They had visited before and briefly lived in Melbourne but had returned to China. This time, they were determined to settle in Australia for good. Robert was a former successful ear, nose, and throat doctor in China, decided to try his hand at entrepreneurship. He and his wife invested all their savings in a restaurant in Sydney, but the business struggled and eventually closed. Robert's subsequent attempts to open a cafe or snack bar also failed due to his lack of business skills and financial management experience. Lin's family had a habit of meeting every Friday night. Their last family gathering took place on July 17, 2009, at Kathy Inman's parents' home. The next morning, July 18th, the Lin family's store had not been open, making long-time customers feel surprised and confused. This sudden closure had raised their concerns. One of them tried to contact Min multiple times but was unsuccessful, so they called Min's sister Kathy to see if she knew what was going on. Kathy was surprised and worried because her brother never closed the shop without making arrangements first. Kathy tried to call Min and Yoon, but they didn't answer. She also tried calling their home phone, but no one picked up. Kathy and her husband Robert were worried, so they decided to visit Min's house to make sure everything was okay. They arrived around 9 a.m. and saw the family car. They went to the house. The front door was unlocked, but there was no sign of Min or his family inside. Kathy went upstairs. When she opened the bedroom door, she was shocked by what she saw. The room was covered in blood, including the floor, walls, ceiling, furniture, and curtains. Yuan Lin's body was on the floor near the bed, and she had been severely mutilated. Kathy screamed and stumbled backward, was shocked by the gruesome scene. In the room next to where Irene slept, a terrible scene took place. Irene lay motionless on the bed, her face beaten and bruised. The bedrooms of Henry, 12, and Terry, 9, also revealed horrifying scenes. Both were brutally beaten to death. Their bodies were found in separate corners of the room. Min Lin's body was found in his bedroom, covered with a blanket soaked in blood. He was killed in the same way as his family. It seems he was the first victim, followed by his wife, her sister, and then the two boys. Kathy immediately contacted emergency services. After Kathy's urgent call, Robert left to fetch the Lin's parents, who lived about 10 kilometers from the crime scene. Police and paramedics arrived quickly, encountering what they described as one of the most horrific crime scenes they had witnessed. Tragically, the Lin family members were all killed. Each person died from multiple blows to the head with a heavy blunt object similar to a hammer. However, the crime weapon was not found at the scene. The initial examination of the crime scene did not reveal any important clues. The killer did not leave the murder weapon behind, and they did not take any valuables or money. This suggests that the main goal was to kill the Lin family, not to steal from them. At first, investigators thought there might be multiple attackers because it seemed unlikely that one person could overpower so many people. However, evidence showed that the children were awake during the attack and tried to escape. There were blood stains and splatters throughout the house. Oddly, all adult victims had head injuries and showed signs of strangulation. Investigators found identical bloody shoe prints in each room with a tread pattern. Although they could not identify the shoe brand, they determined the shoe size. No fingerprints were found, suggesting the killer or killers wore gloves. Initially, the police had no leads or theories about the perpetrator's identity. Friends and neighbors of the Lin family all said that the family had no known enemies, making the motive for the brutal massacre unclear. The attack occurred between midnight and 3 a.m. on July 18th. Brenda Lin, the eldest child and now sole survivor of the Lin family, was attending school in New Caledonia at the time of the tragedy. She learned about the incident through social media and initially did not believe it was related to her family, but the truth devastated her. Brenda soon received a call from her Aunt Kathy, who tearfully confirmed the devastating news. Brenda was immediately flown back to Sydney, where Kathy and Robert met her at the airport. She then moved in with them, as her family's home was closed off as a crime scene. The following day, Brenda was taken to the police station, overcome with grief, to be questioned. However, she had no new information to share, stressing that her family had no enemies and hadn't noticed anything unusual before her trip. After her family's passing, Brenda inherited a significant fortune, including property and the family business. Since she was still a minor and in school, her guardians, Kathy and Robert, took on the responsibility of managing the estate. Brenda's grandparents offered their support, but Kathy and Robert insisted on being her caregivers. Robert even threatened to take legal action if the grandparents sought custody, claiming they were too old to care for a teenager. The matter was eventually resolved, with Brenda remaining in the care of her aunt and uncle. The Lin's shop and publishing business reopened under new management after a temporary closure. However, Brenda had not yet taken over the business operations. Robert began reviewing the family's financial records, including bank accounts, savings, and real estate. Beside that, experts thoroughly investigated the crime scene, documenting every detail, but no concrete leads were found. They believed the killer acted alone and entered the house quietly, possibly threw in with a key. The killer wore size 9.5 shoes with a distinctive tread pattern and likely used a hammer as the lethal weapon, which was never found. The killer wore gloves, leaving no fingerprints or foreign DNA behind. One notable detail was the presence of blood stains on the doorknobs of each bedroom where the killings occurred, indicating the killer's bloody gloves had touched them. However, there were no blood stains on Brenda's room doorknob, suggesting the killer knew she was not present. The Lin family tragedy received extensive media coverage. However, with no concrete evidence or suspects, numerous implausible theories surfaced. Speculation about the family's supposed vast wealth leading to their murder. As the investigation had stalled, no suspects had emerged for the probe. The theory of a robbery had eventually been abandoned because the killer had left money and valuables intact, suggesting the sole motive had been to kill family members. Furthermore, the fact that the house had lost power on the night of the murder suggested that the murderer had been someone who was familiar with the location of the electrical panel. The attacker's ability to control the house in darkness showed that he had prior knowledge of the house's layout. When reviewing the case, an investigator replayed Kathy's emergency call, looking for missed clues. An important hint was detected in the recording. The recording captured Kathy's frantic attempts to explain the situation, her words interrupted by crying and sobbing. At the end of the call, Kathy mentioned her husband's name and talked to him in Cantonese. This piqued the investigators' interest, causing them to translate her words. The translation revealed that Kathy was pleading with Robert not to leave Kathy home alone. This was significant since Robert had left Kathy at the scene of the crime to pick up her parents, despite the potential danger. With 5 people brutally murdered and the killer possibly still inside, Robert's calm aroused suspicion, as if he already knew for certain that Kathy was safe. The police finally identified Robert as the main suspect. A crucial discovery was that Robert had a key to Min's house, which had been given to Robert shortly before the tragedy. However, Robert never mentioned this during questioning, and his wife Kathy was unaware that Min had given him the key. It was Brenda who unintentionally revealed this important information to investigators. Further investigation showed that Robert's claim of being a successful ear, nose, and throat doctor was false. Although he had a medical degree, he had never had a stable job in the field. There were rumors that he had fled to Australia to avoid punishment for alleged bribery charges in China. In Australia, Robert failed to establish a successful career and wasted his remaining savings on unsuccessful business ventures. After moving to North Keeping, he became idle, relying on his wife's income. Once the guardianship papers for Brenda were finalized, Robert acted as if he had inherited the Lin family's estate. His first move was to force Yun's parents out of their home, which Min had bought for them. Although the house remained in Min's name, Min and Kathy's parents were still allowed to stay in their own home that was also purchased for them. Based on this information, investigators suspected he had a long-standing plot to usurp Man family property, money, and profitable business. However, the police could not arrest Robert yet due to a lack of concrete evidence. Through a combination of interrogation, surveillance, and other methods, the investigation team was granted permission to install hidden cameras in the Robert household. They hoped to gather the evidence needed to prove Robert's guilt. The breakthrough came sooner than expected, starting with an unexpected revelation from Kathy during an interrogation. Kathy mentioned Robert's preference for a specific brand of shoes. A few years ago, Robert bought 2 pairs of limited edition sneakers that he really liked. He had worn out one pair and thrown it away, but kept the other pair at home. What's important to note is that Robert's shoe size, 9.5, matched the size of the shoes worn by the killers. The crucial evidence was caught on a hidden camera, which showed Robert deliberately destroying the box that held the remaining pair of shoes. A search warrant was issued for Robert's home. During the search, police found a new pair of size 9.5 sneakers with the same pattern as the pattern collected at the crime scene. In the garage, they discovered a small blood stain, which was later confirmed by a forensic examiner to be a blood stain containing DNA from all 5 victims of the Lin family, linking it to the crime scene. In May 2011, 2 years after the tragedy, Robert was officially arrested. He denied involvement, claiming the blood stains in his garage appeared after returning from Lin's house following the tragedy. He also downplayed the importance of the sneakers, saying they were new and he threw away the old shoes. While in prison awaiting trial, Robert shared a cell with a number of informants whom the police had arranged. During a conversation, he confessed to carefully planning the crime and covering his tracks. He bought the weapon in a store without surveillance cameras and gave his wife tea so she wouldn't wake up while he was committing the crime. He removed the hammer, shoes, gloves, and clothes so police would never find them. At trial, Robert denied everything. The only evidence against him is what the informant said and some indirectly clues. The jury failed to find Robert guilty, and he was released on bail in December 2015. But when the trial resumed in June 2016, another informant said Robert had confessed to being haunted by Brenda since she was 13 years old. Brenda was questioned again and tearfully said Robert forced her to have sex when she first moved in. She kept silent about the abuse for years because she was afraid of what Robert might do. With this new information and other evidence, Robert was officially convicted of all charges. He was given 5 life sentences without the possibility of parole, 1 for each murder. All of his appeals were rejected. The case of April Jones. April Jones was born on April 4, 2007. The idea for her name came from her birthday. Unfortunately, she was not born as fortunate as other children, as it was revealed that she had cerebral palsy, a condition that affected her mobility. One day, April had been playing outside with a friend for approximately 20 minutes, but she did not return home around 7 p.m. as expected. Her parents had last seen her riding a bicycle. They went out to look for her and found her 7-year-old friend, but April was not with her. The friend explained that April got into a car with a stranger. Her friend was able to describe the man who had abducted April. He was wearing a green jacket and had blue or green eyes, brown hair, and a beard. Significantly, the friend mentioned that April had entered the car on the driver's side. This suggested that the car had a left-hand steering wheel, which is typical in the UK. The police responded promptly, arriving at the scene 8 minutes after the emergency call. They interviewed anyone who might have information about April's disappearance, but the family could not recall any unusual events that day. Earlier, April had attended her swimming class and was allowed to play outside with her friends, which was a typical routine. The news of April's disappearance spread rapidly through the neighborhood, and many locals left their homes to assist in the search. While the community's efforts were well-intentioned, they made the police's job more challenging, as the officers had to go door to door to gather information, but many residents were out searching. By the evening of October 1st, the authorities had released additional details about April's disappearance, including what she was wearing: a school polo shirt and a purple coat. More than 100 people had gathered to support the police in their search efforts. Their expertise can be very useful in locating her. Not only local residents showed up, but also a large number of volunteers from England who crossed the border into Wales to offer their support. Several people from South Wales also traveled up to assist. The search would not be easy, as the area around the town was surrounded by mountains, waterfalls, gorges, dense forests, uneven ground and thick woodlands for miles. Additionally, it was a chilly, overcast autumn evening and it was raining heavily outside. To ensure the volunteers' safety, the police had to carefully organize their efforts. Several volunteer search teams were now covering an area of about 60 square kilometers around 3:30 in the morning. 8 hours after the first police contact, the volunteers had been diligently navigating the harsh Welsh countryside. Despite conducting searches throughout the night, there was still no trace of April as of October 2nd, 2012. The police in Wales have now issued a child rescue notice, a nationwide alert for police agencies in the UK requesting that they ensure their officers have a description of April and the man who abducted her. This was the first time the entire nation had heard the child rescue alarm. The media was now putting tremendous pressure on the police. 14 hours after April had disappeared to provide every piece of information they had. It also questioned the way the police handled the probe. After taking over the investigation, Detective Superintendent Andy John began providing the public and media with as many updates as he could. He also placed barricades and instructed his officers to stop any approaching vehicles. Posters with an image of April, who was missing, were displayed in the hope that it would jog someone's memory. People living nearby, as well as those residing farther away, had been providing the police with various reports, as is common in investigations of this nature. Numerous locals identified a man who did match April's kidnapper, Mark Bridger. In general, a man from the area named Bridger was a Land Rover driver. His eyes were blue, he had short facial hair, and above all, he drove a left-hand drive car. Several witnesses claimed to have seen Bridger or his car in the vicinity when April vanished. They found Bridger's last known address and repeatedly tried to contact it, but neither he nor April Jones were there. Bridger had no prior history of legal troubles. Given the large number of volunteers involved in the search, it was impossible to verify the claims made by some residents that Bridger had participated in the initial search for April's disappearance at night. With the limited information available to them, and reports from the surrounding community about Bridger's apparent disappearance, the police focused all of their efforts on finding him. Helicopters hovered above the scene, and the police conducted a thorough search of all possible locations for him. They learned that Bridger had just moved into a brand new cottage named Mount Pleasant. Upon their arrival, there were no visible signs of life, and the property was devoid of any automobiles. They went into the cottage and called April's name, but she didn't answer. It was unclear at the moment if Bridger had been hiding from the authorities. Police helicopter had earlier seen him walking his dog near April's home, having apparently tried to disguise himself by shaving his head and beard. Police cornered and questioned him. The policeman questioned, "Where is she?" Bridger just answered, "It was an accident. I crushed her with my car. I don't know where she is." Officers reported that Bridger was very emotional throughout the arrest. The arresting officers read him his rights, which included the following. "You do not have to say anything, but anything you say may be used as evidence." Oddly enough, Bridger was eager to converse, though he was not required to speak. The officers reiterated that he was free to do so. He informed them, "I've been looking for her all day and night on foot. My car is in the garage. It is a left-hand drive Land Rover Discovery. I didn't abduct her. I tried my best to revive her, then panicked. I only knew her name this morning, when I saw the news on the television. I just wish I could remember where I'd put her. There was no life in her. She was just on the seat. I want to say sorry to the family." They took Bridger to the closest police station. In the meantime, back in April's hometown, police units, search teams, volunteers and mountain rescuers kept searching every square inch of the Welsh countryside for April. Still, despite everyone's best efforts, they were unable to locate her. Along with the emergency services staff who worked just as hard and determinedly, hundreds of volunteers from across the nation stayed out all night, slept for a few hours, and then resumed their search. The police had received over 600 texts from people volunteering their services and proposing locations to search. Because of this, the police had a large number of volunteers to assist them in their search. And because of their local expertise, they were able to check over 20 distinct areas extensively. The people can occasionally obstruct this kind of investigation. Still, local expertise is essential in remote places like this one, and the police needed all the assistance they could get. At this point, Detectives had taken Mark Bridger into custody and were questioning him. Unusually for a man of his standing, he spoke without hesitation. On the contrary, he talked candidly about what had transpired. Right away he said, "I don't know where she is. Yesterday, I came down to see my daughter's teacher. She had a parents' evening and I then parked up opposite my girlfriend's house, which I believe is not far away from April's mother and father's house. Stupid, I'd had a few to drink and there were two girls on their bikes. I remember the dark-headed girl came behind the car. I looked to see where the other girl was, and I couldn't see this other little girl. And the next minute, the bike was there." Bridger acknowledged that he was in the vicinity at the time and acknowledged hitting April with his automobile while intoxicated when she was riding her bike. Mark Bridger insists that he never intended to harm April, even though he acknowledges that he was aware of his error. Instead, he maintains that he took off with her in his car. He needed to bring her to the hospital right away, and that's what he realized. "It's okay, Mark. The color had gone out of her. Okay, her lips were purple. Paul and Call are friends of mine and I've killed their daughter." Effective then, without hesitation, Bridger acknowledges that his actions that evening caused April Jones to die. He even goes so far as to say that her parents were friends. However, Bridger's memory tends to deteriorate following the submission. He has been relatively open about his involvement thus far. Actually, these officers may have never had an easier time getting a confession from some. Bridger can't recall anything about what he did with April's body, though. Following her confession, despite the police's repeated attempts to question him, Bridger's unexpected episode of amnesia persisted. "And I'm in my house, and she's not there. Being upstairs and I can't find her. I wouldn't have ditched her. I know that I wouldn't have. I'd have put her somewhere." With Mark Bridger, the cops have been quite cautious thus far. He'd been entirely honest with them. They can make him clam up with aggressive interrogation, but now they start to question his sincerity. The police were aware that there was very little likelihood that Bridger's memory would be blank at the critical moment when April's body vanished. The pressure increased as the cops questioned him. Even though it is evident that he was lying, he persisted in telling his story and got even more upset. In fact, the cops started to wonder if April was dead at all. Was there anything that Mark Bridger was saying that they could genuinely believe? The police decided to give Bridger a platform to give us account of what happened on Tuesday. The day he was hauled in, however, the police used it as an opportunity to get more information out of him. "You tell me that when you get out of your vehicle, you look underneath the vehicle and you see April." Yes. Although Bridger insisted that he had run over April, the police received evidence from April's 7-year-old companion that April was okay, and had cheerfully gotten into Bridger's car and was grinning. Who would lie like that to a 7-year-old? In actuality, they would not have any cause to, nor would they choose to. We have a witness that was present. This person says that April got into the Land Rover via the driver's door, which on a normal car would be the right-hand side. But that's really the passenger side door on your car. That is a complete fabrication and lies. Can't have happened. Bridger shifted his tone. It was apparent he was unaware that the police had a witness, albeit a 7-year-old one who saw it all. It was clear that the information contradicted his account of events, and he was upset. Regardless of his emotional condition, Bridger remained resilient to the various methods of inquiry, and his version of events held steady. He showed no signs of backing down. The detectives did something. They brought in Dr. Joe Sullivan, one of the world's foremost authorities on criminal body language and conduct. Dr. Sullivan did more than just watch the Bridger interviews. He also went to his house. He wanted to know everything there was to know about this individual in order to create a psychological profile. What he found astounded him. Bridger kept knives, handcuffs, and a shotgun, both hidden and on display at his house. Moreover, he was employed at a slaughterhouse. According to Dr. Sullivan, Bridger was a fantasist who thought of himself as a character akin to Rambo. Stated differently, he was not part of the real world. In defiance of Dr. Sullivan's guidance, the police chose to approach their inquiry in a paternalistic manner. After all, Bridger was a father of 6. Bridger was not going to alter his claim now. Their only chance was with the forensic specialists thoroughly searching Bridger's house. The teams at the house did manage to devise a solution, though. They may have found anyone's blood. They found little specks of it in the restroom. It's possible that Bridger cut himself shaving. It was just that the police were ignorant at this time. After submitting the samples to the laboratory, it can take up to 24 hours to receive the findings. After the police took him in, disregarding his advice, Dr. Sullivan told the officers what he believed Bridger to be. He was unlikely to experience an enormous amount of empathy or have any major sense of guilt about what he had done. Of course, he will inevitably try to present himself as someone who does have those characteristics. But the sense that I had from the information we had gathered even at that time was that this is a man who is not going to respond to an appeal to his better nature. According to Dr. Sullivan, there was little need to attempt to appeal to Bridger's better nature. He didn't have one, and he wasn't going to respond to any police appeals for regret, sympathy, or guilt. Now that the police had taken Dr. Sullivan's advice to heart, Bridger was under increased strain on suspicion of murder. They detained him again right away. It was a shocking shock. Bridger turned completely pale. The police had also found explicit photos of children on his laptop. The reason for his second arrest was that he had offensive pictures of kids. The net was getting closer. Bridger now thought the police had more information than they had disclosed. April's parents were unconcerned, even though Bridger seemed to be losing control of the situation. 3 days after April had disappeared on that fateful Monday night, that the police had given up on locating April alive. It's not an abduction case anymore. It's a murder. Naturally, the police kept this knowledge from Bridger. Still, they also made the decision to advise the numerous volunteers who had put in a lot of effort to locate April that it was time for them to head home and leave the situation to the experts. This suggestion met with stiff resistance as hundreds of exhausted volunteers, many of whom were crying. As they departed the site, they had little to show for their efforts. On Friday, for days after April's disappearance, police search teams were out in full force, scouring the area for any clues. Forensic investigators found no proof that Bridger had killed April. Importantly, there was also no evidence supporting Bridger's account. Inspection of his vehicle, a Land Rover, revealed no marks, blood, hair, or skin, contradicting his claim that April's body should have left scratches or traces inside the car. Bridger tried to clarify by saying he did not witness any blood on April after the alleged collision. The child had apparently been run over, yet showed no visible injuries. But his narrative and the game he had been playing with the police was about to be exposed as a farce. On Friday night at 6:15 p.m., the lab contacted the detectives. They had matched April's toothbrush DNA to blood spatters found in Bridger's bathroom. They also discovered April's DNA on Bridger's fleece collar and jogging bottoms. After gathering sufficient evidence, the police filed charges against Bridger. They had found sexualized photos of minors on his laptop, which he denied viewing for personal satisfaction, despite his internet search history. Bridger had been in custody for 3.5 days by Saturday. As the allotted 96-hour questioning period neared its end, the Crown Prosecution Service had to decide whether to press charges. Just over an hour after the final interview, Bridger remained unfazed upon hearing the charges. There was no remorse or emotion from him. As the prison van arrived, angry bystanders hurled objects and insults at Bridger. Over the next 2 weeks, forensic investigators found increasing blood traces of April at Bridger's house, as well as several broken bones in his fireplace, though it could not be conclusively determined if they were April's due to decomposition. On May 30th, 2013, a jury found 47-year-old Mark Bridger guilty of April Jones' kidnapping and murder. The judge labeled him a chronic liar and pedophile, stating that April was likely not his intended target, but tragically happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. Without hesitation, the judge sentenced Bridger to life in prison with no possibility of parole. Bridger maintained his claim that April's death was a horrific accident when his car struck her, but had long lost any credibility. April Jones was a typical young child full of potential whose life was tragically cut short by a single sick individual. Her family, while devastated, expressed relief that Bridger would never be free to harm another child. April's remains were never found in Bridger's house, though 17 bone fragments were recovered, none conclusively linked to her. Her parents pushed for changes to how search engines handle illegal content, leading to new measures by companies like Google and Bing. April's family and friends will always have a void in their hearts that cannot be filled. Wish for them to be able to reconstruct their lives to the best of their abilities. On April 26, 2013, April's funeral service was held in her hometown. May April Jones rest in peace.